Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to challenge the historical facts we've all kind of just blindly accepted, and we'll uncover the fascinating physical science behind exactly why we got them so completely wrong. We tend to think of history as this rigid set of facts, right? Just carved in stone. But as we're going to uncover today, the past is actually incredibly fragile, and our understanding of it is constantly being rewritten by the subtle forces of time, chemistry, and human assumption. All right, let's dive right in. I want you to picture a classic Greek or Roman statue in your mind's eye. Now, if you're like almost everyone else on the planet, you're probably picturing this pristine, imposing figure made of pure, gleaming white marble. That stark, monochrome look has basically defined our entire visual understanding of antiquity. For us, it represents elegance, restraint, and classical beauty. But there's a major problem with that image. It turns out that cold, white marble aesthetic we associate with antiquity, it's a total illusion. The actual historical reality tells a completely different story. Those statues were originally painted with wildly vibrant colors. We're talking bright reds, deep blues, striking yellows, and brilliant gold. Ancient Greece and Rome didn't look like the sterile, minimalist galleries of a modern art museum. They looked way more like a vividly colored carnival. The stark white aesthetic we see today is just a modern construct, a huge misunderstanding born out of the physical limits of preservation.
Section 2. Rapid Fire Historical Myth-Busting, Unlearning What We Know.
So once you realize the ancient world was literally painted in Technicolor, you really start to wonder what else we've completely misunderstood. First up in our rapid-fire debunking, contrary to popular belief and virtually every Hollywood movie ever made, the pyramids were not actually built by slaves. Yeah, the archaeological evidence tells us that these monumental structures were constructed by respected, well-fed, and highly skilled laborers who were often given honored burials right near the pharaohs they served. The whole narrative of millions of oppressed slaves dragging stones under the crack of a whip is an incredibly persistent myth, but the historical data simply does not support it. Okay, next up, despite what centuries of pop culture, comic books, and sports mascots tell us, Vikings absolutely did not wear horned helmets into battle. Just think about it practically for a second. In close quarters combat, having giant handles on your head for an enemy to grab or for a sword to catch on, that would be a terrible strategic choice. The horned helmet was actually an invention of 19th century theater costume designers who were staging Wagner operas. It looked super dramatic on stage, and the public just kind of accepted it as historical fact. Section 3. The Science of Misperception. Why we believe the myths. So the real question is, why is our physical perception of history so incredibly skewed? To understand how completely false narratives become accepted truths, we have to look past the history books and turn to the physical sciences, specifically things like organic pigment deterioration. This is literally the physical breakdown and loss of natural coloring agents over long periods of time. You see, the ancients used paints derived from organic materials, things like minerals, plants, and animal byproducts. These aren't like our modern synthetic acrylics. So when they're exposed to centuries of wind, rain, sunlight, and burial in the soil, these organic compounds chemically destabilize and just wash away. This physical breakdown fundamentally altered how we view the past. Let's see how this natural decay actually builds over a 2,000-year timeline. Look at year 0. The statues are newly created, just glowing with vibrant paint. But leap forward to year 1,000, and we see severe pigment deterioration. The colors are fading, flaking, and chemically breaking down. And by the time we reach year 2000, which is when modern archaeologists are unearthing these treasures, there's a total loss of color. Only the bare marble remains. Natural deterioration literally erased the vibrant reality of the ancient world. So when Renaissance sculptors eventually found these blank white statues, they just imitated them, unintentionally cementing that white marble illusion into our global consciousness. But pigment deterioration isn't the only science twisting our historical view. Actually, sometimes the science of preservation creates its own historical distortions. Take the totally bizarre and honestly slightly dark case of Elmer McCurdy, famously known as the Funhouse Corpse. This is a fascinating example of how chemical interventions can completely warp our understanding of physical history. Basically, the science of the era is the true culprit here. Early embalming techniques relied heavily on arsenic, which is a highly toxic chemical. This arsenic fundamentally altered the body's physical preservation. It effectively mummified the tissue, defying the whole natural process of biological decay.
Because of this chemical anomaly, Elmer McCurdy's physical form was altered so drastically that his preserved body was actually mistaken for a mannequin. It was used as a funhouse attraction for decades before anyone realized it was a real historical human remain. It's a wild story for sure, but it perfectly highlights how chemical preservation can wildly skew our perception of historical artifacts.
Section 4. The Great Data Decline. Reframing Historical Loss. Whether it's the washing away of ancient pigments, the misinterpretation of theatrical costumes, or the bizarre chemical mummification of a funhouse corpse, we are constantly battling the decay of information. When it comes to romanticized history, we tend to think original truths are lost in single, catastrophic fires. We picture the tragic burning of the Library of Alexandria, dramatic events that resulted in a sudden, devastating loss of truth. But the historical reality is actually much less cinematic. It's the gradual decline of data. It's centuries of slow obscuration. It is the slow flaking of paint, the gradual misinterpretation of texts, and the quiet fading of memory. Original truths are obscured by centuries of gradual decline. History isn't typically erased overnight by a villain or some singular disaster. It fades away, quietly and persistently, just like the colorful paint on a Roman statue left out in the rain. Every single day, a tiny microscopic fraction of the truth is lost to time, until eventually we are left staring at a blank piece of white marble, utterly convinced that it was always meant to look exactly that way. As we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with a provocative question to chew on. What facts from our current era will inevitably fade into myth through gradual decline? If thousands of years of data decline erased the brilliant colors of the ancient world, transformed skilled laborers into fictional slaves, and put imaginary horned helmets on the heads of Vikings, what absolute truths about our lives today will be completely misunderstood by the humans of tomorrow? It really makes you look at the world around you a little differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for exploring the vivid truth with me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the obvious, and keep unlearning.